Good evening. This is Surya here. Okay, so finally, I think we're going to start the session. So Shiva, you want me to get started, or is there any introduction or anything that you want to give?
Yes, Surya. Shiva will introduce the webinar series and then you take it up from there.
All right, sure.
I welcome all for the GWFM webinar series. This is the first webinar series. It's really great pleasure having Surya Mohapatra, with us. Surya, is a learning global head from Wipro. He will give his introduction, more than like what I give. Thank you for joining us and taking time. There's some error in the beginning due to technical issues. However, we would go ahead now. And Surya, you could start now, with your brief introduction. That would be really great. And I have your presentation already popped up here. Over to
Uh,
you.
uh, Welcome, Surya. Partho here. Welcome, everyone. It's a first in the series of the webinars that we are launching today. Thanks, Surya, and everyone else for the support. We hope to take it forward with all your inputs pouring in. Thanks a lot. Sorry for the trouble. Technology isn't agile all the while. That's what I can understand. Yeah. All yours, Surya.
All right, thank you, Shiva. Thank you, Parthada, for setting the context. And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to be the first presenter in the GWFM webinar series. So it's a privilege to be the first presenter. It's an honor. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. We have pretty much lost about 30 minutes, but that's the reality of our life. So when I say that's the reality of our life, this is a great example of a VUCA world. It's absolutely volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And we saw what we went through. Shiva, Partho, and I did a testing in the afternoon. Everything worked fine. But when it was time for the event, and then technology did not really support us. And this can happen anytime, any moment, any day. We might experience this any number of times. So the most important thing is what happened, what did we learn from this, and how can we use that learning in future in different situations. I think that's what learning agility is all about. So we have tried to be as agile as we can. We have tried to deal with the technological challenge, and the important thing is we haven't given up. So you haven't given up, you have stayed on in the session, and we haven't given up. We are determined to continue with the session. So Shiva, you're kindly going to help me with the slides in terms of moving the slides, and I'm going to introduce this topic to all of you, Agile L&D in the Agile time, with a case study. Here is a question for all of you. I'm talking about an organization which started its journey as a grocery trading store in the year 1938. In 1969, this company entered the electronics industry, and its first products were the black and white televisions. In the 70s, this organization expanded into textile manufacturing. In the 70s, it also ventured into shipbuilding, heavy industries, chemical and petrochemical industries. As we move on, ladies and gentlemen, any guess who are we talking about? Let's move on to the next slide. This company in the 70s, you already have the answer on the screen. In the 70s and 80s, it got into the semiconductor business, electronics manufacturing. 78, it got into aerospace. Between 85 and 90s, it started manufacturing LCD screen. And in the 2000s, it's a global leader in manufacturing smartphones, televisions, smart TVs, tablets, and other electronics goods. How many of you would have, when I shared this previous slide and then said this company started in 1938 as a grocery trading store, how many of you would have really imagined that this could be Samsung? Since I can't see your responses on the chat window, I'm probably assuming not many of you would have imagined, unless you knew the history of this organization, not many of you would have imagined that this is the company I'm talking about. A phenomenal example of agility, learning agility. A company we started as a groceries trading store, which got into textiles, shipbuilding, electronics goods, semiconductor business, LCD screens, smart TV, and so on. What is an incredible, unbelievable journey. Not many organizations in the history of the industry would have gone through so many changes that this organization went through. Absolutely unbelievable. This organization was agile. It kept learning throughout its journey, and not just it had new experiences. It learned from that experience. It decided to change itself, change its shape and size, change its business model to stay relevant in the times, to stay relevant to the present times, to stay meaningful, to continue to create value for its customers and itself. But it kept on changing, learning from its experiences, made some mistakes on the way, closed down some businesses, started some new ventures, thrived in some of them, did not succeed in some other, continue to learn from the experience, continue to grow, and became a market leader in its own space today. This is a great example of learning agility. This reminds me of a quote as we move to the next slide, which you will see, a quote by Gautam Buddha. And Buddha says, just as a snake sheds its skin, we must shed our past over and over and over and over again. For a skin to survive, it has to shed its skin a number of times in its lifetime. That's the only way it can survive. Similarly, we as human beings, individuals, living entities, will have to shed our past over and over and over again. Move on with a new present, move on to a new present, new future. That's the only way we can survive. Organizations, teams, functions, societies, social groups, every entity has to move on, has to give up its past, adopt a new present, move on to a new future. And it has to keep doing it over and over and over again. But the trick is not just to change, not just to move on to a new reality. The trick is also to do that fairly quickly. Do that with speed. Do that with real agility. That's a very famous statement, which goes like this. In the new world, it is not the big fish which eats the small ones. It is the faster fish which eats the slower fish. So in today's world, it's not about being big, having more financial muscle, political muscle. It's not about having the backing of money, wealth, influence, etc. It's not just being about big. It's also about being quick and agile. It's about making the first move. It's about trying to experiment and learn from the experiment quickly, make mistakes quickly, learn from the mistakes quickly, and make course correction quickly. Do not wait for the perfect product. You would never have one. But if you keep building your perfect product, keep learning from the prototypes, keep making the course corrections, and keep moving on. That's the beauty of learning agility. It's about flexibility, it's about speed. Famous learning and development expert, speaker, researcher Arun Pradhan puts it beautifully. He says learning agility is the ability to continually, rapidly learn, unlearn, relearn mental models and practices from a variety of experiences, people, and sources, and to apply that learning in new and changing contexts to achieve desired results. So there are some key words in this. So learning agility is the ability to continually and rapidly and continually, here the two important words here, learn, unlearn, and relearn mental models. Mental models are the beliefs, the values that we have. So learning and unlearning our mental models and values and beliefs, learning and unlearning new practices, new ways of doing things, learning all of that from a variety of experiences, sources, people that we interact with, and apply all that new learning in new and changing, evolving situations and contexts to achieve the desired results. So this is what learning agility is all about. It's all about continuously learning, unlearning, relearning at speed. At speed is the most important thing here. That's what makes it different from learning ability. So learning ability is the ability to learn, unlearn, relearn. But the most important thing is to do that at speed. As we move on, this talks a little bit of theory and talks about how all this started. So Lombardo and Eisinger in the 2000 coined this term, learning agility. They defined this as the willingness and ability to learn from experiences and subsequently apply that learning in new situations to perform successfully under new or first time situations. So new and first time situations tells us something important. What it tells us is knowing what to do when you don't know what to do. So a new situation or a different situation is something which is where we don't know what to do or what is the right thing to do. But knowing what to do in a situation like that is the key. So that's an interesting aspect of this definition. But what they also say here is learning agility is not just about the ability to learn. That's the easier one because that could be a set of behaviors, that could be a set of do's and don'ts. That's easier to learn. That it's easier to develop that ability. But what's difficult to acquire, or what is difficult is the willingness, is the motivation. Many a times people don't change because they lack the motivation to change. They believe that it's not going to work. They believe they're not cut out for this. They believe that it can never be done. They lack the motivation to change. They lack the motivation to learn from experiences. And that is a very famous saying, which goes like this: never stop learning because life never stops teaching. So life teaches us all the time. Really learn from those experiences. Life throws millions of learning opportunities to all of us. But how many of us really pick up those opportunities and then make the best use of them? most of us don't learn from experiences. Most of us keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again because we don't learn from our experiences. If you don't learn from our experiences, then you're going to repeat the same mistakes, not only in new situations, different situations. We are also going to repeat the same mistakes in the same situations. So the two important aspects here, one is the willingness or the motivation to learn, and the other one is the experiences. History shows us that leaders who refuse to let go of entrenched patterns of behavior, or leaders who do not recognize the nuances in different situations, they actually tend to derail. Leaders who are successful continue to develop on their role, continue to develop in their job, continue to develop in their role through new experiences. And we now know the successful leaders are learning Agile. The unsuccessful ones are most likely not learning Agile, because the learning Agile leaders demonstrate motivation and ability to learn throughout their careers. They never believe that they have arrived in their life. They believe that they are students in the journey of life, so they keep learning all the time throughout their career. As a result, focus has shifted to find and develop individuals who are continuously able to give up skills, perspectives, and ideas that are no longer relevant and learn new ideas. So that's why organizations were really focused on thriving and remain competitive and take up leadership positions in the market, focus on identifying, attracting, selecting learning agile leaders. And they also focus on developing learning agile leaders. So they know that it's important that they go out and select leaders who are learning agile. But at the same time, they know that they may not find everybody, or everybody they select may not be 100% learning agile. So they also have a plan to develop their leaders and grow them and develop their learning agility. So organizations focus on hiring leaders who are learning agile. They also focus on developing that skill set in their leaders and in their people in general. The famous quote of Alvin Toffler, all of us know, just a appropriate reminder at this point in time. The illiterate of the future will not be those who cannot read, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And extending that definition, what Arun Pradhan said, it's not just about the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn. It's about learning, unlearning, and relearning at speed. That's the important thing. So learning ability is not equal to learning agility. So learning agility is essentially learning ability at speed, at great speed. So let's move on. A little bit more theory. Again, there's two guys who evolved learning agility model. They talked about 4 different types of learning agility. They said people agility, which is all about the extent to which people are self-aware, they know themselves, and the extent to which they can learn from experiences and treat others constructively, and they're resilient under pressure of change. Change agility is all about the level to which individuals are curious, they're passionate about new ideas. It's all about people who are willing to experiment, those who are willing to change, those who are willing to engage in skill building activities. So that's all about change agility. Rachel's agility is all about the extent to which individuals are motivated, prepared, willing to get results under tough conditions. They have the tough temperament. They do not want to give up. In spite of tough conditions, unfavorable situations and circumstances, they are resilient enough to do their best, and they're absolutely focused on outcomes and results, and they have the ability to inspire others to perform beyond their normal capability and drive results. But mental agility is all about the ability to deal with tough situations mentally, the ability to deal with ambiguity, the ability to become comfortable with discomfort. So that's the mental toughness. So they have talked about four aspects of learning agility, which is all about being self-aware and developing the ability to learn from experience. It's all about developing curiosity and passion for new ideas, for change, for transformation. The results agility is all about driving, just being very focused and having very clear line of sight about outcomes and results. And mental agility is about being mentally tough to deal with ambiguity, complexity, volatility, and so on. So we'll move on and we'll talk about a couple of interesting data points here. And some of the recent studies around learning agility says executives, leaders with high levels of learning agility are 5 times more likely to become successful. They're 5 times more likely to stay engaged. Leaders, individuals, employees with high learning agility are promoted two times faster in today's times. Companies with high agile individuals have 25% higher profit margins than their peer groups in the industry. This is not what I'm saying. This is something what research um, across the industries, across executives in different organizations brings those findings to all of us, which accentuates the fact that learning agility is not just about individual development. It's not just about coping with um, the challenges of our times. It's not just about learning quickly and then moving on. It's also about driving great value to the industry, to businesses. It can drive engagement, it can drive performance, it can drive results. It can even drive greater revenues and profits for organizations. This is what the research findings tell us today. As we move on, some more research findings, again, some correlation um, established by the researchers through different analysis. So here is some correlation analysis, which was conducted by researchers in this space in 2015. These researches were primarily conducted, primarily done to investigate and understand the relationship between learning agility and performance. So it was revealed that there was a strong positive correlation, and that has been very clearly established. They also found another relationship. They found those who score high on learning agility are more likely to have a higher performance score. That's something that you can see in this graph. This correlation analysis also tells us the underlying factors of learning agility, which were investigated in relation to performance. This tells us that with change and results agility being the two factors that correlated most strongly with performance. So we talked about change agility and results agility a few minutes ago. So the ability, it's the preparedness to change, and it's the strong resolve and determination to achieve outcomes. These two types of learning agility are the two factors that correlated maximum or most strongly with performance vis-a-vis the people agility or the mental agility that we talked about. So these are some interesting analysis that we have seen in recent times, which very clearly establishes learning agility and performance. So learning agility is not just a theory, It's not just a concept, it's not just a framework, it's a clearly established, tried and tested approach to drive business performance as well. We will move on, and we talked about different analysis, we talked about research findings, we saw the correlation between learning agility and performance. Let's look at some of the myths about learning agility. Some people believe that the younger population are more learning agile. One particular gender can be more learning agile. People from some certain background, some coming from some cities, coming from some countries, from some provinces, coming from some cultural background, etc., are more learning agile. People who have certain titles like leaders, CEOs, and CXOs, transformation experts, etc., are more learning agile, but that's not true. Learning agility is not confined to any of this. It's not confined to any age, gender, background, origin, qualification, country, culture, etc., etc., etc. Anybody can be learning agile. Anybody who has the right temperament, motivation, willingness, and who is prepared to develop certain skills and develop certain behaviors can be learning agile. And that person can come from anywhere. That person actually come from nowhere and can prove to the world that he or she has absolutely phenomenal learning agility. So my request for you is not to go by any myth. Don't believe that younger people or people from certain background or people in certain roles are more learning agile. So as we dispel these myths and then move on to the next topic in this important discussion, let's look at some comparison as we look at individuals with high learning agility and vis-a-vis people with low learning agility. What kind of differences that you see in their behaviors, in their demeanor, in their mannerisms, etc. People with high learning agility, if you look at them, and if you try to relate these examples with some of the people that you know, you can try and recall some of the people. People with high learning agility are actually active because learning agility is an active process. It is not a passive process. People who are passive, dormant, sitting idle, just doing their job, coming into office, doing their job and going back, are definitely not learning agile. Most likely not learning agile. Learning agile people are active. They're always active. They're engaging. They're talking. They're taking feedback. They're trying to reach out. They're experimenting. They're trying out new things. So one very striking difference is their activeness. High learning agile people are more likely to take charge, create new plans. They're always ready to implement new ideas. But low learning agile people tend to stick to status quo. They said this has never been invented here before. Why are you trying this? We tried this in the past, it failed. So let's stick to the status quo. People with high learning agile, they seek complexity, they seek challenges, they're ready to accept change. If a new challenge is thrown at them, they're the ones who are ready to accept it before anybody else. Low learning agile people are defensive towards change. High learning agile people are optimistic, they're hopeful. Even in the midst of hopelessness, they're still hopeful. But people with low learning agility are unable to rebound from stressful events. People with learning agility, strong learning agility, have got the ability to rebound from stressful events faster. They rebound from failure very fast. They continuously refine and polish their skills. They they focus when they go through a new experience. They focus on mistakes more. They're the ones who look at what did not go well. What am I going to do differently next time I'm going to try this? The famous tennis player Nadal has a great story behind him. Every time he goes out to play, he keeps serving, he keeps bouncing the ball in between the serves. And sometimes it does it for so long, the referee has penalized him on a number of occasions. But in one of the interviews, he said that in between the serves, I keep bouncing the ball so many times, but nobody knows what I'm doing. I'm reflecting at that time. I'm reflecting on what did not go well, what went well, what did not go well, what I'm going to do differently next time I'm going to play shot. So that's the beauty of learning agility. When you focus on your mistakes and you keep refining and polishing your skills. Learning agile people are more organized and methodical. They have got high risk-taking appetite. Low learning agility people have got they stay away from taking risks. They do not venture into areas they have not ventured before. They have got very low risk appetite. So that gives us a good comparison. Look at people around you, look at people in your teams, in your organization, in the societies that you live in, and try to find out people and then relate these qualities with them. And you'll have a visual image of people who are high learning agility, learning agile, and the people who have low learning agility. Let's move on. All right, so how do you know how learning agile you are? How do you know that are you learning agile or not learning agile? Here is a good technique, a list of questions I'm going to give you. You can ask these questions to yourself. And if you answer all these questions on the left positively, then you know that you have got very high learning agile. But if you answer positively the questions on the right side, then this will tell you probably that you need to do some more work. Now, let's look at some of these questions on the left and ask these questions to yourself. Do I challenge the status quo in an attempt to make improvements? So do I challenge the status quo when I try to improve something? Do I tell myself, well, it did not work in the past, but that does not mean it will not work today? Am I prepared to challenge the status quo? Do I experiment with new ideas and endeavor to find the best solution? And I'm prepared to make mistakes when I'm experimenting, because I'm experimenting. I know it might succeed, it may not succeed. Do I pick up subtle cues to build a better understanding of the problem? So am I opportunistic? Am I always looking for new ideas? Am I looking for cues for new ideas? Do I stay calm when I'm faced with a challenge or when I'm under stressful situation? Do I make time to critically reflect on my experiences? I talked about Nadal. I gave his example. Do I do like him? Do I take time out? Of course, he takes time out in between his serves. Sometimes it's very irritating for his opponent as well as the referee or the umpire, but he takes time to reflect on his experience. Do I examine past failures for lessons? Do I volunteer for roles that are ambiguous, new, or otherwise challenging? If your boss comes to you and tells you that from tomorrow onwards, along with your current role, you'll also have to sell this product, will I say yes or will I say no? Will I say selling? Oh, it's not my cup of tea. I've never done it. Well, that's not my job. That's not that you hired me for. You hired me for an administrative job, and now you're asking me to sell. So, do I volunteer for new roles? Do I take up new roles with excitement? Do I take enjoyment from struggling with a challenging problem? So, does struggle also gives me the kick? Do I consider my personal role both in success and failures? Most importantly, do I seek feedback because I need it? So, if the answers to these questions are positive, then you are a high learning agile person. As we move on to the next slide, if you get a, let's go back. Yeah, so if you're green on all the questions on the left, then you are a high learning agile person. Let's look at some of the questions on the right side. Do I try to achieve the best with what I have at my disposal? Do I choose the most readily available solution and move on to the next challenge? Do I trust my intuition to guide me to solution? Do I move quickly from one track to another in order to accomplish more? Do I take enjoyment from managing a well-oiled machine? Well, what's the fun? What's the challenge in that? Do I listen to feedback because others want to give it? Well, then how serious, how keen I am about feedback. So the questions on the right tell you about, provoke you into thinking whether you need to do some more work on your learning agility. So this questionnaire is a good tool which you can use on yourself to find out how learning agile you are. But my request would be to honestly respond to these questions. Don't respond in a manner that you want yourself to look like, but respond in a manner which will tell you about what you really are today. You can use this tool with your teams, with your team members, with your function or group. If you're an L&D practitioner, you can use this in your organization to test and find out. It can be used as self-assessment. It can be used as a multi-rated assessment. It can be used as a peer group assessment to identify to determine the learning agileness or the learning agility score of your people in the organization. Let's move on. So we talked a lot about learning agility, its importance, significance. We talked about the traits, the behaviors. We talked about the research findings. But now the question is, how can L&D make a difference? Today's topic is about agile L&D in agile times. How can learning and development function in the organization make a difference? Well, as you can see in the next slide, L&D function can play a very important role in building a learning agile organization. Let's move on to the next slide. Yes. So, but before we talk about what L&D can do to enable the organization and the people in the organization to become learning agile, the big question, the million-dollar question is L&D learning agile itself? If L&D is not learning agile, how can this enable the organization to become learning agile? How can it enable the workforce to become learning agile? So what's happening in today's times today? There's something which is very interesting that's happening. All of us know about the change, the disruption, the technological disruption, mobile technology, the smartphones, and then the blockchain, your cloud computing, big data, analytics, robotics, all that is changing the way we work today. Now, it's also changing the way organizations function. It is so there is an evolution, there is an emergence of a new technology almost every day or every hour, and that's leading to emergence of new business models, business practices, new strategies. So there is change which is happening constantly. There is change which is happening at phenomenal pace. How can L&D, but when you look at L&D, the life cycle of designing and developing and deploying new curriculum is too long. The cycle time to understand the need, design, develop, and deploy new solution, learning solutions, absolutely long. and organizations do not have the time. People do not have the time. If technology changes every day, you cannot wait for 3 months for a training program to be ready. So how can L&D create an ecosystem? How can L&D create an infrastructure? How can L&D create an environment? How can L&D bring in the right platforms where people can learn on their own, where people can learn through collaboration, where the people can learn through their peer and social groups, where the people can work out loud? That's where L&D can bring about tremendous value. That's where L&D can bring about a change. What else is happening today? Millennials are taking over the workplace. They are going to become the majority of them. They already become the majority in the workforce. They might probably become 70 to 75% of the workforce population in the next few years. The way they learn, the way they engage, their preferences and tastes towards learning, their learning styles are very different from the Gen X. Now the question is, how do we cater to their learning styles and preferences? How do you create an environment for them where they can learn seamlessly? What else is happening in the industry? The workforce today has become virtually on the go, virtually mobile. The workforce today is almost everywhere, working almost all the time. So how do you create learning solutions to a workforce which is always on the move, always mobile, always working 24/7, working in the coffee shop, working at the airport while waiting to board the flight? How do you really bring about learning solutions which will cater to such an audience? So how can L&D create learning solutions which is engaging, interesting, relevant, available on the go, on demand? That's where L&D professionals can make a difference. The mantra for the L&D leader is to change yourself so that you can lead and lead to change. So that's the mantra for L&D professionals. When organizations need to learn to survive and thrive, is the L&D function which can help them learn and thrive. So L&D has the most important role in this whole scheme of things as organizations try to become learning agile. So let's look at a few slides. In the interest of time, I know we started late and then we're kind of running out of time. But now let's quickly look at what are the learning agility enablers? What are these enablers that organizations and the human resources functions and the L&D functions should look at today? What are these enablers? These enablers today are the following: innovation, engagement and adaptability, reflection and risk. So can we create an environment where people can innovate? Can we create an environment where they're willing to challenge the status quo, where they're willing to challenge the long-held assumptions, they're willing to innovate, they're willing to become creative and then come up with creative solutions? Can you create an ecosystem like this where failure is accepted, where people are not penalized for failing, where people are celebrated for bringing in new ideas and new innovations? Can organizations, can L&D contribute to create such an environment? Engagement and adaptability is the next enabler. So learning from experiences happens the most when we are overcoming an unfamiliar challenge. However, in order to learn from such challenges, an individual needs to remain engaged in handling complex situations. So can we really create an environment where people stay, where first we provide them challenging environment, challenging circumstances, put them through discomfort, through disruptive situations, stay engaged with them as they grapple with these complexities. Can the leaders in the organization walk the talk? Can they create an environment where they stay in while they adequately challenge the workforce the way Steve Jobs used to do? He would not accept anything mediocre. He would challenge his people to stretch beyond their capability and then achieve more. But at the same time, he would also stay engaged with them. That's a fantastic enabler. Reflection. I talked about reflection. I gave the example of Madan. Can we really, at the end of every new experience we go through, can we stop for a moment? Can we pause for a moment? Can we step back and ask four fundamental questions to ourselves, either as an individual or in a group? What are these four questions we can ask ourselves? The questions are what we wanted to do, but what we actually did. What was the gap? Why was there a gap? What we should do differently so that we address this gap next time when we approach a similar situation or a different situation in any part of the organization. Every time we complete a new project, one module in a particular project, complete a new assignment, achieve a new milestone, we must pause, sit back, ask these four questions. What we wanted to achieve, what we actually achieved. Is there a gap? Was there a gap? If yes, why there was a gap? What we need to do differently next time. But as L&D leaders, practitioners, consultants, when you go to organizations, talk about reflection, sometimes leaders tell you, where is the time? Unfortunately, leaders in many organizations today do not have the time. They do not have the time for reflection. They do not have the time to get their people to reflect. Then how can we develop learning agility in organizations? The other ability is risk. It's about taking risks. It's about being as individuals, as teams, as functions, as groups, as organizations, taking the guts and the courage to experiment and take risks. When organizations create that environment, they succeed. So these are the enablers of learning agility. Now we'll look at what are the derailers. If there are things that enable organizations to become learning agile, what are the things that derail this process? Let's look at the next slide. These are some of the learning agility derailers. So not being open to experience. So being open to experience is fundamental to learning, but not being open is a derailer. It is no surprise that that individuals who remain closed or defensive when challenged or given critical feedback tend to be lower in learning agility. So one biggest obstacle or one biggest stumbling block in the learning agility process is defensiveness. People who are generally defensive are very low on learning agility, who are closed to feedback. Those are not open to taking feedback. Those who offer excuses for their failure, they're not likely to be learning agile. And leaders who are more defensive, they actually establish the wrong culture. They set up a wrong culture in the organization because the people who look up to them also grow up to become defensive. So that's the biggest derailer in learning agility. Learning agility, agile individuals seek feedback, they process it, they adapt themselves based on their newfound understanding of themselves and situations and problems. But the people who are low on learning agility do not ask for feedback. So thereby they do not process feedback. Thereby their opportunity to learn and grow is absolutely low. And the other derailer of learning agility is people who are low on confidence, people who are low on risk taking, people who have low risk taking appetite. So, lack of confidence comes as a big setback or as a big stumbling block in driving learning agility in the organization. So, closeness to feedback, defensiveness, low on confidence, and in a culture and environment which does not encourage any of this can become derailers for learning agility. And the most important and the most dangerous derailer is defensiveness that gets in the way of learning agility. Now let's move on. The famous L&D, the learning guru expert Arun Pradhan talks about the anatomy of powerful agile learner. He talks about some of the key attributes of agile learner who has the ability to who learns to think and who has the right support system and who is learning smart and who is learning while doing. So these are some of the aspects of a learning agile individual, and if you kind of break it down, you would see some of those aspects, and you will see that a high learning agile person always is on the move. He's always thinking. He's always trying to experiment new ideas. He's always reflecting. He's curious and has the growth mindset. He has evidence-based learning strategies, and so on. So he spends a good amount of time in thinking, and he reaches out for support. He reaches out, he walks out loud, he reaches out to his peer groups and then say, I need help. He reaches out to coaches and mentors and asks for help. He or she is learning smart. He has developed continuous learning habits and is very effectively uses the performance systems, support systems available for him or her to become effective. And he is willing to learn by doing. He takes up stretch assignments and projects. He's prepared to experiment and fail faster. And he is doing deliberate practice. He's practicing again and again and again to sharpen his skills. So, my dear friends, think about it. How can we really, as an L&D practitioner, enable all of that? How can we get people to reflect? How can we get them to become curious? How can we keep them, provide them right coaching and mentoring? How can we provide them performance support systems? How can we keep them stretch assignments? How can we give them opportunities to experiment and fail? How can we give them opportunity to practice? And how can we build continuous learning habits in them? L&D can make a difference here. As an organization, what can the leaders do? Organizations enabling learning agility, they can, or the leaders who enable learning agility in organizations, do that by giving direction to people to learn, by providing a sense of purpose and wisdom, what is in it for me to learn, by providing feedback to learn, by creating opportunities to learn, by creating, by making learning easy and seamless through the right systems and through the right tools, etc., and by giving them the confidence to learn. And they can do all of that. The direction will come from a shared vision. Purpose will come from campaigns and communication. It will come through communication and campaign. Feedback to learn will come through measurement, analytics, recognition of learning champions, and so on. Opportunity to learn will come through courses, resources, through collaboration, through stretch assignments. Easiness to learn will come through systems, and confidence to learn will come through a culture of learning where the psychological safety is available for people who spend good amount of time learning, experimenting, trying, etc. So leaders and organizations can contribute to learning agility process by providing the direction, purpose, feedback, opportunity, ease, and confidence. L&D can provide by creating opportunities in its curriculum in this program for reflection, for building curiosity, for using evidence-based strategies, creating opportunities for searching for information and making sense, providing opportunities for coaching, providing assignments, building continuous learning habits, creating performance support systems, creating opportunities for practice in the curriculum, and so on. As we move on, quickly, I know we're pretty much on top of the hour, just about 5 minutes to go. I will quickly bring up a case study in the next slide before we wrap up. Let's move on to the next slide, please. One second. Yes. So this case study, if you can bring up that case study again on the slide. Yeah, this talks about a British multinational investment bank which had a problem of low throughput, low productivity, low motivation, higher attrition, lower employee engagement, and longer deployment cycles. They're grappling with this. And they identified that the problem is people are not learning Agile. They are not open to feedback. They have a fixed mindset. The organization believe that they really need to shake them up and really work on their learning agility. So they embarked on a learning agility training program or development program. And they started with a pilot with about 800 people. They found extremely great results. And they went on to provide this training program to their 130,000 employees across. And they saw phenomenal results out of it. Within the first year of transformation, the organization transitioned from more than 800 teams into agile ways of working, generating a throughput increase of 300% and making it possible to release a new software every 4 weeks with 23 times fewer incidents. And most importantly, they managed to increase the employee engagement and satisfaction tremendously. And the objective when they started was to build one team. The teams were working in silos, individuals were working on their own in silos, but they ended up creating one team across organization, across functions and teams and capabilities, which were focused on delivering value to their customers. That's a phenomenal outcome that this organization achieved. The takeaways from this case study would be agile transformation requires coordinated effort at different levels of the organization, right from the top all the way to the entry-level employee in the organization. For best results and to gain sponsorship, start with a customer. If this customer becomes your sponsor, then the leaders will become your sponsor, and the entire organization will adopt that practice. So these are a couple of takeaways from this case study. I will quickly move on to the next 2 slides. Here are some tips to improve learning agility. I'm not going to read them verbatim. I will just pause this, keep the slide here for a minute or two for you to kind of scan through this slide and then quickly capture some of the tips that you can see here, which can become extremely valuable for you. If you have got these tips right, we'll move on to the next slide for another set of tips. Yes. And I will pause for a moment with that slide. And that pretty much brings us to the end of this first webinar, um, brought to you by GWFM as a part of their selfless initiative to serve this community. So it's a great initiative to serve the community, and that's something that GWFM has been engaged for the last couple of years. And so this brings us to the end of this webinar. These are my credentials in case you want to reach out to me with more questions, etc. I'd be always available to engage. In the subsequent slide, I would like to give credit to some of the experts and researchers from whom I borrowed some of the great ideas, transformational ideas on learning agility. The next slide actually talks about those researchers. If you can bring up that next slide, please. There is a credit slide in case you can bring it up. Doesn't matter. I think we have some challenge in bringing it up. No, that was at the end. But if it's not showing up for some reason, that's fine. But there are some. Oh, yes, this is the one. So these are some of the experts and researchers and thought leaders and industry experts from whom I borrowed some of their models and frameworks and ideas about learning agility. So I must give credit to them. Once again, thank you very much, Shiva, Partho, for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you, the audience, for first being very patient in waiting as we move through the technological glitches, and then giving me a patient hearing. Back to you, Shiva.
Thank you so much, Surya, for taking time out, not to in the late evening. It's really fantastic learning for people out here, and a lot of them are really watching. And I tried taking, through Facebook Live, and even there were a lot of around 25, 30 of them are watching your slides. I did that attempt, uh, maybe with your permission, if any of the members ask any of the slide, and if you're okay, we will share. Anyway, we'll talk offline on that.
Sure.
Do you like to take any questions now, or we'll have offline questions so that you can answer them back? It's too late, so is it fine? Yeah. Do you like to take any question, one or two questions now?
Yes, I am game, provided the audience is ready. I know it's too late.
Is anyone like to ask any questions? You can raise your hand so that I can like give you access to talk. Here's a person by name Sanjay. Sanjay wants to ask question. Sanjay, I will unmute you. Yeah. Hi, Sanjay. You have a question?
Yeah, no, I don't have question. It was a great session. Thank you so much, Surya. It was really a great learning. Just last two slides, I think at least I was not able to read it properly. Just a request if you can share those slides, it would be a great help.
Sure.
Sure,
The slides are with Shiva, and I think you will have those slides. So, but thank you very much for your feedback.
Yeah, it was a great session. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Sanjay.
Anyone has any questions? Please raise your hand. Here is a hand icon. You can just click on that. It shows so that I can recognize and like unmute you. Okay, so person who just raised and then dropped up. Looks like no more questions. Thank you so much, Surya. Thank you so much, audience, for watching this. Hope this is recorded well. We'll try sharing this across along with the PPT. Thank you so much. Stay connected with us in our social media.
Hey, Surya, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity. I really enjoyed doing this session.
The first time is we had technical glitches, but nevertheless, the fact that we managed to communicate and communicated well because Surya was around. And I keep saying, when Surya is around, there is no darkness. Thank you, Surya. Hello, everyone.
Thank you.
And
Thank
and
you very much.
interestingly, all the audience logged off and then logged in. So we have got very good audience who really spend time with us watching this. Thank you so much for them, and Surya, thank you so much for taking time out. It has been a fantabulous learning for the people who were present here. Thank you so much.